Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jorge Vega. I am an innovation researcher focusing on how to launch companies in, let's say, gray area markets, which include sexual health, anything that might be stigmatized, tabooed. And we're here to talk about something that will give anybody performance anxiety, which is looking for funding for your company. No matter what kind of company, it always gives us a lot of anxiety. It's very personal thing for a lot of us. So hopefully we're going to be able to hear about your experiences today. If you don't mind, I'm going to pass along the mic to you. And if you can give us an introduction of who you are and kind of what are you focusing on right now.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you very much for inviting us as a speakers. My name is Evren Inangiray. I am the co-founder and the CEO of Pureeros. Virginia, my business partner, has already introduced the company, and I think this is a very interesting panel because at the end of the day, we can have great ideas, but if you don't have financing to develop your business, you don't go anywhere. This is unfortunately the truth.
I'm going to assume that most of you were here about an hour ago when I introduced myself, so I'll keep it short and sweet and not bore you. I'm the CEO and founder of Kittens. It's an online and offline platform empowering women sexually. And in response to the reason why I'm sat up here right now is we were the first adult brand to do a public crowd funding raise last summer where we raised £500,000, and we're going again in about 2 weeks' time. Go us. So, yeah, that's where I'm sat here right now.
Well, we're rooting for you. Let's start with you, Emma. We talked about this earlier, and we heard from you in terms of how you've been able to mobilize a lot of communities around the projects that you've initiated and how important that is. Can you tell us a little bit more about specifically when you are tapping into these communities to look for mentors, for funding, for any kind of supporter? How are you approaching these conversations, particularly with people that have never really invested or maybe have some qualms about supporting or participating in let's say, in funding a company in this space?
I mean, for us, and as I mentioned before, with the community side, that's what drives us and has done since day one, and it's communicating and being completely direct and being completely honest and open. And when we decided at the beginning of last year that actually, because our whole setup is about community, that it just sort of made sense that to do our first raise was to put it out there to the community. And we had no idea how people would react. We had no idea what the response would be, and we hadn't ruled out going down the VC private equity route. But we just said, you know what, we're gonna write an email from me to go out to all our members saying this is what we're looking to do, this is what we're looking to build, being very open and honest. And if you're interested in being part of the journey, then register your interest. And we also had a link for high net worth individuals to register as well, because legally there's only certain things that you can't just directly approach people and say, give us your money. You can register the interest, but we could only directly approach high net worth individuals who qualified as that. So that's all we could do, and we put it out there, and actually it was a very humbling experience and overwhelming, the support we got and the interest we got from our members wanting to be part of it. And so that's why we thought, well, actually the crowd raise is the obvious way to go. Because I said, I wanted members who'd been members for over a decade, to be able to put £10 in and to feel part of it. We didn't just want, as I said, I don't want, 5 city boys with swinging cocks, putting in a lot of money and saying, I part own Killing Kittens and a sex party company. It's sort of, that wasn't what we were about. We wanted 400 people and a lot of women to be able to feel part of it. So you can, when you're approaching communities, I just think you've got to be direct, you've got to be honest, completely open. And something like, when you're raising money, it can be done anonymously. So you're not asking people to go public and post it on Facebook and Instagram. I've just put, I'm investing in Killing Kittens or this tech stack range. So you're not asked, there is that anonymity behind it. So people won't won't mind.
So I mean, and obviously this is part of your community, but have you tried to reach out to potential, I don't know, people in BC that may not be already investing in the space? And I'm wondering, what have those conversations been with people that might be investing for the first time in a company
do you know what? It was tricky at the beginning of last year because we were sort of a very sex brand, and what we wanted to do and what was being created was sort of coming out and being more lifestyle, being more mainstream, but it was convincing people that it wasn't some seedy sex party setup. It was much bigger. But we had interest last year because at the end of the day, when you're raising money, it's a business. You're a business raising money, and if you have a good product, if you have good figures, if you have put a good pitch and business deck together, that's what it comes down to. You're not fighting its sex. Yes, that's a hinder, but at the end of the day, VCs and investors are looking at the product, and they're looking at the business plan, and they're looking at the figures involved, just like you do in any industry. So I think sort of hiding behind that, oh, no one wants to invest in our business because it's a sex business, it's like, that's bollocks. That's just an excuse. We went out with a 12-year track record, the figures that made sense. We had a really sort of non-aggressive valuation at all. It was sort of a very conservative valuation, and we raised the money in 14 days from putting it live. If none of those things had aligned or been right, then you don't do it. So it's a business, and sextech, you're dealing with businesses, so it works the same way as any industry and any businesses. What we have now had is actually this year. A lot of VCs actually have approached us, they've seen what's happened. They've seen our, the business and the nuts and bolts behind it. So we're having more conversations now. But, there still is there's a lot of VCs and a lot of private equity groups out there who won't touch it and won't touch sex tech. And that comes down to their personal psychology. It's got nothing to do with the business sense and the figures. It comes down to you're dealing with people who just don't want to get involved in the sex world. That's it, bottom line, and you're never going to convince them.
Right, which I don't know if anybody here is aware, there was a recent note from UBS Group, and I think they did a survey with portfolio managers, and they found that 40% of portfolio managers, generally speaking, would not invest in sex tech, or they would not invest in the adult industry, but they would invest in guns, for example, or fossil fuels. So I think it's very, very telling that when we look at that, there is still that kind of like that stigma. And then, Evren, I would love to talk about your experience, because you've also went out and tried to sort of like raise more traditional type of direct investment, and now you're pioneering. You're basically a case study for how to do crowdfunding, especially for equity, right? So can you tell us about your experience? How do you decide to now go into a second stage of funding around sort of like equity crowdfunding, and what have you learned in the process?
It's tough. It's very tough. I mean, raising funds, as Emma said, is tough, and you need to come up with a real business plan. You need to have correct figures. It's not only about product. It's about really providing something that has a story, and this story really works, and investors can see potentials, returns in the investments. We basically went on crowdfunding for our second round of fundraising after only 12 months, and it was a very interesting experience, and I think Emma knows very well. And at the beginning, we were a little bit, because we are a UK company too, so we know that Emma was on SISTR. We thought to start with SISTR at the beginning, but then we decided to approach Crowdcube, which is the other major equity crowdfunding platform in the UK. The idea was for us more to leverage three main, let's say, points of the crowdfunding, which is the opportunity to raise cash in a short time period, if your campaign goes well. The second one was basically to promote their business, and also the opportunity to make some branding for the business. Because the reality is that sex tech companies really struggle still with fundraising, and going crowdfunding was also an opportunity, as I said, to have those 4 weeks to raise cash and investors. They really know that they can invest only in that window of 4 weeks. So you invest now or you don't invest anymore. The second point, as I said, is promotion. It was also an opportunity to promote the business as a Pureeros and also the sector among the investment landscape in London and also internationally, because we received investments from Australia, Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong. So it was very interesting for us to see that Crowdcube and I believe also SISTR have a very international audience. And in addition to that is brand, and also, is also for the reason why was for branding reasons. Emma said that there are some investors, they don't touch sextech because they don't really understand what it is. And if you, as a man working in this industry, and fortunately we see a lot of business women, coming on board and really leading this industry, when I talk to investors, I see that as a man, they really don't get what I'm talking about. And I'm also a guy. So when we talk about, opportunity to invest in a company producing vibrators, they really don't get it. There is nothing to do. So if they don't have it in the mandate of the fund, they really don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. However, things are changing, and are changing also thanks to our company. And again, coming back to the branding side, why we chose Crowdcube? Because we wanted to leverage the Crowdcube brand. And the Crowdcube brand is also a way to say, hey, sextech is a sector like any other sector. It's a sector that has huge potentialities. It's really at the beginning of, its life, and there are a lot of opportunities for everybody. Mm-hmm. If you compare other sectors, if you get like fashion, I'm Italian, so I like fashion. Would you invest in a fashion, or at least as an entrepreneur, build a fashion company today? Well, good luck with that, because it's overcrowded. Mm-hmm.
One question then, it seems I'm interested in hearing more about when you have these interactions with investors. What is the most frustrating misconception that you want to fight against, especially understanding that there are some legacy of patriarchal thought, of traditional thought that might be seeping into their filter of why or what the value that they see in a business?
Well, look, it's not really a frustration, but it makes me really. It's funny because anytime we go to pitch Pureeros, so we introduce Pureeros to investors, the first reaction is they're laughing at us, always. When we go, myself and Virginia, and it's very funny, the first introduction is really laughing. And then when they start to hear us, and they know that there is a solid background, a solid company, and they really understand that we are talking about real business. We have a company which is UK-based. We have people on 3 countries. We distribute in all Europe. We are not like a simple startup or a simple business. So my frustration is I don't understand why they don't get serious since the beginning. But in a way, we are, in the meantime that we grow our businesses and also we grow the sector, we are also growing the knowledge. So everything that we do more as entrepreneurs and probably as investors, it's also the opportunity to take these people, and bring them at the table and really say, look, a part of the boring fintech sector, or all this, with all due respect, of course, and these other sectors like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, mm-hmm. fashion, food, prop tech, whatever you want to call it, there is also sex tech, is 120 billion expected valuation in 4 years. Mm-hmm. And we are still alone in the village. Why you wouldn't invest in an industry, mm-hmm. in industry like this? Mm-hmm.
Well, let's try to find out. Welcome.
Well, now it's up to you.
No, thank you so much. And actually, I'd ask you if you can sort of tell us who you are, a little bit of what you're focusing on right now, and then yeah, how do you, when you hear what we've been talking about in terms of
I only
potential,
heard
how new
half of it,
investors,
but
how they approach, just like how they approach the industry for the first time. What are sort of like the misconceptions that you see on your side as an investor trying to evaluate the potential of these companies that you are fighting against?
Okay, I can answer all that. So my name is Lina. I'm an investor with First Minute Capital. We're a $100 million seed stage fund based in London. I'm half Swedish and half German, so I spend a lot of time in Germany. And in terms of the types of investments we can do, we're totally tech agnostic, so we can look at any sector. The reason for that is we have a fairly unusual LP base, so our investors are largely successful founders. We've got 30 unicorn founders invested in the fund, and we wanted to be as opportunistic as possible with that money. So have ended up investing into almost 40 companies, completely across consumer-facing to very deep tech. I have carved out for myself, so I'm looking at digital health, but then particularly interested in femtech and its overlap with sextech. So we've actually got a couple of investments in the space as well. We invested in a company called O-School, which is a sex education platform over in the US, some of you may know. And then we also invested in a company called Daddy, which is addressing the male sperm crisis. So the fact that sperm motility and sperm count has fallen very rapidly over the last 50 years. Means you can store freeze your eggs at home, basically. So that was just a bit of background on the fund. I think in terms of how I think about the space, we definitely see an opportunity there. But I think so I've met lots of sex tech founders over the last few years. The problem, or the reason why we most often say no, I guess that's maybe a good way to approach it, is because we don't see how it can become a billion-dollar company. And I think there are pockets in sex tech and femtech where you can build those massive companies, but there's not that many precedents. So you have to educate the investor. As a sex tech founder, you have to educate the investors on why this time this is going to be a massive company and why the opportunity is so big. So I think that's the most common hesitation from the side of the investor. And if you look at how a fund works, you have to hit those really big returners. So you have to always think, can this be a billion-dollar company? Can't just be a $50 million company, even though that might be a great company. So I guess that's one thing to keep in mind. And then there's definitely an educational aspect as well in terms of the different sectors, particularly if you're looking at, most investors are still men. If you're looking at companies that are addressing female problems or just desires within sex tech, I think sometimes there's an educational burden on my part then to say to the team, okay, here's a real problem. This can be really big, and there's a lot of understanding in our fund that sometimes you need a female perspective on a company.
I'm very interested in Emma, I'm going to start with you for this next question. There is, a lot of times the way that a company would go about finding funding, it really is through the network. And even as something as basic that we were mentioning earlier with a participant is that there's some people in the space that are even kind of afraid of putting what they actually do on like their LinkedIn, for example. Or even reaching out to that typical kind of like friends and family network to tap into potential connections that then are going to give you the funding. So going back a little bit to what we were talking about, forming your own community and then educating investors, what are some opportunities, what are some conversations that we should be having right now to sort of change the conversation and then actually say, listen, it's time to sort of create the networks of supporters, of funders, of angels that have to be investing in this now because it's a critical moment in terms of what we're doing?
I think, to be honest, very simply with what you said, that there are people who don't want to put it on their LinkedIn. They don't want to ask family friends. At the end of the day, if you don't believe in it and you're not willing to put your hand in the air and jump up and down screaming, saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what I believe in, and I couldn't give a flying shit if I get abuse. If you're not willing to do that, then how can you ask anyone to get involved? And I think, that's a big part of it. If you're not willing to do it, then why is anyone even going to give you 10 euros? So, to us, it's, and when I launched in 2005, and I say to people sort of, if 9 out of 10 people are telling you not to do something, if you just listen to that one telling you to just go for it, and I probably had 9.9 out of 10 people telling me not to do it, and that I was stupid, and it was disgusting, and I was mad, and but I was willing to jump up and down and take the abuse and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I believe in, and actually see the billion-dollar company at the end of it, and that's it's been a 14-year journey, but where that's raising money last year and going again now, we have projected, and that's what we see. We don't just say, right, we're going to build this bit now and take it to this level. It's sort of, right, where's that billion-pound company, and how are we going to get there? So we've got the end point, and that's what we're doing and creating at the moment. So to me, it's that simple thing. How are you going to get money off anyone if you're not prepared to jump up and down and scream it from the rooftops?
Yeah. Evren, it seems that you've been jumping around and yelling from different parts of the world.
If you like to invest in my company, I mean, feel free.
So I'm interested in sort of understanding also, how does this play out on a global scale? I mean, obviously there are investors everywhere. There's potential high net worth individuals that might provide some funding because they believe in your mission. When you're looking at different regions in the world and the type of investors that you find there, do you find that there are, let's say, regions where it's easier for you to have these conversations, and how are you developing that?
Look, I mean, my personal view, which is really brutal, is that fundraising is hard anywhere in the world. So we cannot believe that because in America, US, they invest like bigger checks or they invest more often or more. It means that you go there and you say, hi, ciao, my name is Evren, I come from Italy, invest in my company. It doesn't work in this way. So it works, as Emma said, you really need to be able, to sell your product, your business, and your business needs to have like something, metrics, traction. Otherwise, investors, they don't see any return in a part of the entire solving problem, stuff like that. From my perspective, probably US, it remains, let's say the region in the world where probably people invest more. It's because I think my personal view is about also the mindset, okay? Mindset is more driven and focused on business. People are really willing to take a chance on you, and they also have a market which is huge, and customers are always looking for new things, new business models. In Europe, living mainly between London and Italy, so I have both visions. We are still very conservative if we want to compare us with US. I don't know China very well, so I don't want to say anything about it. I just know that it's a big market, it's a huge market, but it's also like a market where if you don't follow specific rules, you can be shut it down in 1 second. If you remember, I don't know, Dolce & Gabbana had a big troubles with a communication. They were out from the market in 2 hours. So again, in Europe, we are very conservative, but we cannot stay, in our chairs and just blame someone or complaining that it's a little bit hard. We raised cash, our first round, we raised cash across UK, Italy, Hong Kong, and China. And when we do fundraising, I approach anyone. So I don't mind where this person comes from, if there is an interest, and if I need to, to get my goal, which is financing my company, I go anywhere. And at the end, if you have a good product and people are interested, you will find investments. So my opinion is, if you are at the beginning, probably starting within your market is more easy, because fundraising is also expensive. If you need to travel, you need to pay your expenses. And so if you need to have a coffee, you need to pay the coffee at least. So you can start like in your own market, leverage your network, and ask to anyone to invest in your company. Anyone. So because if you don't believe in your company and you don't have the courage to manage the money, because at the end you are managing money of your parents, your sister, or your family, you cannot do this job. Don't do it.
Lina, I turn to you. You know, there are entrepreneurs like Emma. You already know kind of like what does that $1 billion company look like. Help us understand a little bit. There's a lot of intangibles that potentially a lot of VCs are, have a harder time understanding, that might show, hey, there's actually a lot of value in this company. There's a formula, right? Like there's almost like a VC formula in terms of you look at like different numbers and you try to size up the market. Is there a richer way? Are there any measures? Is there a story that entrepreneurs that are looking for funding from VCs should be telling to sort of say, okay, beyond the numbers, or these are another alternative numbers that show kind of like the momentum or the value that we can have?
Yeah, I'd actually contest what you say a little bit in that we have very little data at seed stage, like hardly any data. Some of the stuff we've done has been completely pre-revenue. Some of the stuff's been just a business plan. That's rare, but sometimes also happens. So I think much more important for us is the story of the founders and how they got to where they are, why they're doing this, how much resilience have they proven in the past, are they extraordinary individuals? Like, we try to build a really 3D picture of the founder. We will do lots of personal references, understand are they like superstars within their fields, and thereby we end up funding very diverse, people within totally diverse sectors of very different backgrounds, because they have remarkable stories in their own right. So I think that's the most important thing at seed stage. And then, yeah, I do think the burden is partly on the entrepreneur to paint a picture of how the company can, as I said, become really, really large. But that should be, that should almost come with your passion about the space, I guess, when you pitch the company.
Mm-hmm. And let me follow up with that. I mean, when we are talking about, let's say, approaches to investing, obviously there's a lot of always, not competition, but comparison between what is it like to raise money in the United States, potentially in Europe. From the outside, and this is from conversations that I've had from people that are coming from the States to here, I mean, there is an excitement just because, Americans are prudes in some things. And there's a lot of understanding of the angle of sexual health, for example, that might be an advantage to talk about certain companies in the space. Are there benefits for sort of like chasing, if not larger kind of like investment, but just better investors here in Europe?
Not sure I would call us better investors. We have a shorter history of investing into venture, so I think, but I see the point around why you might want to go and pitch your sex tech company to a European investor, just because they're maybe on average more sexually liberated and educated and so on. I don't know if I'm making a gross sort of prejudice here, but that is my feeling, that you might have more understanding. On the flip side, there is a reluctance sometimes in Europe to fund companies that aren't monetizing yet. So I think there's bigger bets in the US where people go completely unmonetized for a long while because the investor takes a longer term view of ultimately this can be a really large company. So I think we're more conservative, is what I'm trying to say, in Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. Any two of you have had an experience where you understand that there's a comparative advantage? I mean, obviously you are both European. Is there how do you rep Europe almost in a way? How are you tapping into potentially some of the cultural nuances that make it a fairly rich and open place for you to start the kind of company that you're doing?
Well, for us, we our community actually, because we launched events in different countries all over the world, from New York to Sydney to Europe. So, and every time we've launched in a city, we've built that community in that city and the online community. So for us, it's quite straightforward to see the differences, because we've got sort of a tribe on the ground in those countries. So, and actually from that we can see the response to when we emailed out last year about doing the crowd raise that we did, going down that route. We could see actually the response from different countries of which nationalities were coming forward and which were sort of the bigger, more high net worth individuals investing larger amounts. And actually, we got a lot of interest from the States, but at the time back last summer, CEDAs weren't accepting dollars. So we couldn't take any money from the States last year. We're doing the particular raise we were doing on the crowd side. They've now changed that policy and they do take dollars. So actually, when now we're talking to people, it's a lot of out in the States. And they are, as you said, they're much, in the States, they're much more sort of go out and get and entrepreneurial and fall in love with the ideas, and they see that bigger potential, and it's the American dream, and, so they don't need to see, the revenue coming in at the moment. They are more on the ideas, where, the European side, then I think that because we've had that over a decade track record and figures that speak for themselves, that's really helped us, regardless of nationality, really. I mean, I don't think we've seen a huge difference in whether they're Brits or French or Italians on the European side.
Thank you.
I cannot add anything else. I mean, probably, the only thing that I might add is that it's trying to show more value than just the business. So people really, I think nowadays, people really want to believe that they are buying or following a dream, someone that is fighting for them. Like if you see even, let's say, Dame in US, fighting against the New York MTA, it's really going beyond the fact that you are a simple business. And this will help you for sure to receive attention from anyone within the industry, who is not only the client, investors, business partners, and so on.
And then we're going to be closing out soon. But Lina, I wanted to talk to you more also. What are the prospective milestones that are going to tell you as an investor, or potentially are going to tell other investors, hey, this is time we should be taking this industry more seriously than usually they do, right? And here we take it very seriously. We know that there's a lot of political and social signals that say that this is coming out into the open. But what is going to be the milestone? Is it going to be Apple coming up with their own sort of Apple branded product? What are milestones that you're looking at to sort of measure the evolution of the market, where it's, okay guys, this is it. There's no doubt that we have to put a lot more money into this.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question, because I think what we would monitor is just traction of larger businesses in the space. So how much money has been raised by the industry? What are the exits like? What sort of level, are they exits between $50 and $100 million? Are there, or are there really big exits? And I think we're yet to see some of those coming. So my view is definitely that we see the potential in that sector already now, and we think there will be big outcomes in 5, 6, 7 years. So you've got to be a bit forward-looking if you're going to be a good investor. But yeah, I don't think someone like Apple looking more closely at the space would mean that we're suddenly pouring money into sex tech startups. I don't think that link would, exist.
Well, and to close us up, I'll just, very quick question for you. What do you wish for? What are you, if you had to say, this is what I wish funding was like, apart from just being easier?
To me, to be honest, it's not so much it's the sex bit. I think for me as a female and doing what we do and standing for what we stand for when it comes to KK and that empowerment of women, I would just want to see the whole funding industry actually a lot more female friendly. But at the same time, to me, that I'm doing a lot more when it comes, in the political world and the education side. And to me, it starts at the grassroots. And I want to see that starting. I've got 3 kids under 5, and I'd like to see the changes in the education system. And so from minute one, and already we're dealing with, our 2.5-year-old daughter, and we're very careful, me and my husband, what we say to her and the way we treat her, to not have that unconscious bias that you automatically have on the male-female side of things. And I think for sex tech and the sex industry as a whole to really come flying forward, a lot has to be done from the minute they're born, basically. And so I want to see the education system changed, and when it comes to sex education, kids, that to me is the most important part of any of this, and educating male and females, and that will just sort of then come through into the funding world and the female-founded business world and the sex industry, and because it won't have that stigma anymore. But you can't just suddenly, have a magic wand and suddenly make it all happen overnight now. You've got to start at the beginning and invest time in it.
Well, look, for me, I agree 100% with Emma. There is this, social side of our job and the sector, which is very important on the educational side. And from a business point of view, I wish that we will be able to grow faster than what we are doing at the moment, because to me there is no doubt that this sector will grow, and along with the sector, other companies. So I hope to see new sex tech companies, sexual wellness companies, femtech, coming on board and also unlocking even more investments, because we are basically building the ecosystem. And so if you are building the ecosystem, you also need to take some steps a little bit, out to your comfortable zones, which is from entrepreneurial side and also from the investment side. And for Pureeros, as a founder, I hope that we will be able to be more successful, because being successful helps others that come after you, to build the ecosystem, as I said.
Very much for Lina, Eva, and Evren. And yeah, that was it. Thank you.